Okay, Year 12 Global Politics. Today, we're going to be looking at the challenges that global actors have when it comes to resolving the crisis of terrorism. So, the skill here is to be able to analyze. So that means that we do need to be able to break it down. So basically, how is this a challenge? Why is it a challenge? Are the examples of this challenge kind of happening? So that's really the focus here. So yeah, let's get started. So when we're talking about one of the challenges, and I think this is probably one that you can apply to, the United Nations when it comes to resolving the crisis of terrorism, in particular, the Security Council, and that is multilateral cooperation. For those of you that have forgotten, multilateral cooperation is when 3 or more global actors work towards specific goals. So, for the United Nations or the Security Council, their goal is peace and security. And, this could be undermined for a number of reasons. It could be because of mistrust between states, diverse interpretations of national interests. We've seen that with Russia and with China, with their, vetoing of the resolution in February 2017. Even just the idea of a veto, that can really challenge their ability to resolve a crisis. In some circumstances, a multilateral resolution may not pass if states have been accused of funding or hiding terrorist groups, which could violate international law. And ultimately, multilateral processes can be slow. It can take a long time for any kind of resolution to pass. So that could undermine their ability to actually resolve the global crisis. Also, sometimes when there's diplomacy, some global actors may meet together, they may come up with, they may talk with each other and at the very end say that they've been actually successful when they haven't actually really done anything. All they've done is just talk about the problem. But in terms of actually the examples that we've looked at and what has been, the challenge there in resolving it, it's really been veto in the Security Council, mistrust of states and different interpretations of national interests. They've been probably the main ones when we're talking about the Security Council. So you would have remembered from our last video on responses that the United Nations Security Council came up with a resolution in 2017. It was resolution 172. This resolution was proposed by France and the UK, and it was about imposing sanctions on individuals and entities involved in the chemical weapon production. Russia vetoed the resolution, calling it politically biased. So they, politically biased, it shows that they don't trust the international community. They think that there's something fishy going on. And also, there's national interest here. Russia are allies with Syria. It's their main ally in the Middle East. So that there can be, problematic for any kind of multilateral cooperation if states have underlying national interests. So states sometimes just don't agree with each other. They don't trust each other. And this has further been seen through the Special Envoy for Syria, who have said that they just want the US and Russia to find a way to work together to stabilize the situation. Chemical weapons have continued to occur, and they just say that, the people here are in grave danger. So cooperation needs to work. We need these global actors to actually work together to resolve the issue. However, these issues, the mistrust and national interests are preventing genuine action from taking place. To kind of talk about then veto, we've seen this issue in the Security Council. There's been 26 resolutions on various issues within Syria, humanitarian access, peace talks, chemical weapons, Russia and China have vetoed 10 resolutions. And, further on, Russia have by themselves vetoed an additional 6. So this shows that it's a real challenge to resolve an issue if we've got this veto, this use of veto. So, I guess ultimately there can, we are finding that there's an issue here with states cooperating, with states actually, working together and unite to defeat this threat of state uses of terrorism. So that's a problem, and that's a challenge that they need to resolve. Another challenge when it comes to terrorism is counter-terrorism strategies. So counter-terrorism strategies are a strategy used which risks creating new threats in the process. And the reason for that is that they try to actively stop terrorists through identifying and capturing them, through defending a target from an attack, focusing on specific groups and targets, and using intelligence. So some counter-terrorism strategies could be airstrikes, drone attacks, and this can be a problem because if they can, or if a state uses airstrikes, yes, they may attack and kill the terrorists, but in the process, they may actually find themselves killing civilians. And this is what has happened. So yes, although these military activities can be effective in capturing and destroying these terrorist groups, it does result in civilian casualties, and it does offer propaganda material to terrorist recruiters and then defines the West as the enemy. We've seen that, and we have seen that occur. With Operation Inherent Resolve, it was a US military campaign against against intervention against ISIS in Iraq and Syria. There were, 34,000 strikes. They killed multiple ISIS fighters. However, in the process, there were many civilians that were killed. So that was a problem. 1,472 civilians were killed. So that created, some actions where we actually saw, civilians being attacked, and that could have created further propaganda. Just trying to find an actual example of this. I think I've got a quote here I'm trying to find of when this actually occurred. There's a quote that I'm trying to think of, and I just can't seem to find it. It was like, after these attacks, there was a child who openly said to Donald Trump that, the war is beginning or something like that. I'll have to find it and I'll share it with you guys later. But yeah, it has created propaganda, it has created hate towards the West. So that in itself as a counterterrorism strategy, we're trying to here defeat terrorists. However, we can find ourselves then creating more tension and more hate towards the West. So yeah, and further on, identifying and capturing terrorists. This can be hard to do when we have asymmetrical warfare. And that as well is a key aspect and a challenge when it comes to resolving terrorist organizations or undermining the threat of terrorism. So we have asymmetrical warfare, and asymmetrical warfare is the opposite of conventional warfare. That, conventional warfare is about military confrontations with the goal being to defeat enemy forces. Terrorist organizations use this method because, state military have more resources, they have more manpower, more weapons, so terrorists need to find a way to defeat them. So asymmetrical warfare will use covert strategies. they'll use guerrilla warfare, and will try to avoid actually, direct military contact. They will try to use covert strategies, unconventional tactics. So, the reason for this is, and it's a challenge to actually then resolve the crisis, because these attacks are unpredictable. It may be a suicide bomb that comes as a surprise. So you don't really know when it's going to happen. It's unpredictable. The only way you're going to be able to find out is through perhaps intelligence in counter-terrorism strategies. There's also the hit, run and hide tactics, where they will, hit a target, they'll run away and hide amongst the general population to avoid capture. And that is possible when, the US aren't familiar with that territory in that area. Civilians may actually be harboring some of these terrorists. And in terms of like an unpredictable attack, in 2019, ISIS killed 22 people in a attack during Sunday Mass in the Philippines. 22 people were killed, 102 were injured. Now, this was an unpredictable attack, and it came as a surprise. It wasn't like they knew it was going to happen. And to add to that, it's a suicide bomb. So it did mean that, the people won't end up being held accountable. So that's the issue with asymmetrical warfare is, these strategies, these attacks, do result sometimes in people not being held accountable. Counter-terrorism is about stopping terrorist attacks and identifying them. However, it is difficult to identify terrorists and defend your attacks when these terrorist organizations are using these covert operations where they hit and run and hide. So we can kind of see the asymmetrical warfare and covert operations can link together, so therefore it is difficult to resolve the crisis because of those two things. And asymmetrical warfare is also a key aspect. So we've got three different challenges we've looked at: multilateral cooperation, asymmetrical warfare, and counterterrorism. I hope that was helpful. And if you've got any questions, just let me know. Thank you for watching, guys.